This episode contains a discussion about active shooter lockdown drills, which may be upsetting to some listeners. Discretion is advised.
Shall we get started? Hello, everyone, and welcome to Generation, the podcast, the audio companion to the HBO Max original series, Generation. I'm Whembley, Sewell, editor-in-chief of Them, a publication for and by LGBTQ folks.
Yes, and I am Gigi Goode, your average, everyday, run-of-the-mill drag superstar. Today, we are talking to Zelda Barnz, once again, co-creator of Generation, and Nathanya Alexander, who stars as Ariana, and I am so excited to get into that. But first, episode 2, here we are. A week has passed. Whembley, what did you love about this week's episode?
I think, first of all, there's a lot to unpack in this episode.
Definitely.
I mean, it's called Discovery. And I feel, again, there was a lot to discover. On a serious note, gathering myself, I found the episode to be a really beautiful exploration of mental health. And I thought it really examined how stress and anxiety and fear manifest themselves. Even though, of course, it takes place in a school, I think it really held a mirror to a lot of things that we're all feeling right now, no matter where we are, in a really poignant way. I'm still sitting with it, to be quite honest. Yeah. Again, there's a lot to unpack, and I'm excited to unpack it with you all here today.
Yes, I can't
Absolutely.
wait. Let's unpack. Okay, well, once again, we are so excited to welcome back Miss Zelda Barnz.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
And of course, we're so happy to talk episode 2 with the hilarious and talented Nathanya Alexander, who plays none other than the Ariana.
Miss Ariana,
indeed.
That girl.
She's something, huh?
She is.
She truly is.
Ariana was introduced episode 1 at the party. Right off the bat, she says some pretty homophobic stuff and brushes it off and thinks it's okay because we find out she has gay dads.
Yep.
In this episode, we do get to know her a little bit better. It's not like you're all like, who's this girl? And then it's over. We do get to know her a little bit better. And I think a lot of folks, myself included, find a soft spot for your character because she is iconic, for lack of any better word. Here's her introducing herself in the GSA Club. Let's play the clip.
So, maybe we could all introduce ourselves with a fun fact.
Ooh, can I start? I'm Ariana, and my fun fact is my parents are gay.
Hey, wow, that's very special.
Yeah, they freaked out over a couple of jokes I made this morning and said if I didn't come, they stopped paying for my phone.
Oh.
And then I recently learned that they're thinking of bringing a third into their relationship. They read my text, so I was like, let me return the favor. Apparently, when you're gay, your slut phase lasts even after you get married.
Okay, thank you. Let's try something besides fun facts.
Quick disclaimer, that is not based off of my parents.
Oh,
Quick
I was going to ask.
No, my parents would die. No. Oh my gosh.
We have to go there.
Absolutely.
Zelda, we talked a little bit about it last week, and we know you have 2 gay dads.
Yes.
How much of yourself did you put into this character?
You know, it's funny. I never really thought of myself as very similar to Ariana besides having gay parents and that family dynamic. But I don't know. I do think we both have pretty irreverent senses of humor. And Ariana's sense of humor tends to lean a little dark, definitely. I don't know, but it's so interesting. I think specifically with that scene that we just watched, when Mrs. Culpepper says, like, that's so special as a reaction to Ariana's like, I have gay dads declaration. I just think it's so funny. You do sometimes get a lot of that because people, when you're a child of gay parents, because people want to let you know that like they're cool with it. And it's so hard to always be like, yeah, it is very special because it's just my family. It's just like how I've grown up. And so I definitely have moments where I like want to go to the Ariana place and like say something crazy. But I'm never quite brave enough. And I think that, writing her character, it was like, she just says whatever she wants to, and she says what she thinks is funny, and she doesn't really care how it lands, and she doesn't really care about her audience so much. She just wants to kind of entertain herself and have fun, and that was so much fun to write for.
The character as Ariana has so many zingers in this episode. Like, all the comedic relief in this episode really feels like it's on Ariana's shoulders. She is so funny and so self-possessed, and people will just tell Ariana flat out, like, girl, you can't say that stuff. And her response is always, my comedy's edgy. Like, it's edgy. I'm she's coming off kind of hard. So here is her when she is recording these hysterical, slightly cringy videos during lockdown. Let's play the clip.
Oh my god, I think there's a shooter outside. Like, I think they're gonna come in. I'm too young to die. I'm freaking out.
Ariana?
Oh no, I'm good. I'm just having fun with my dads.
I want to know, like, what do you think that's in response to? Like, do you think that is somewhat, in some ways, like, tied to mental health? Like, what I'm asking is, why do you think she is the way she is?
Loaded.
Yes, well, Ariana, I think all of her outrageous behavior stems from the need to be seen. Like, she never ever wants to feel invisible. That's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. I also think a big part of her character is defying expectation. And I think a lot of people assume that she's going to be woke because she has gay dads. Mm-hmm. And I think she's a little bit like, no, fuck that. Like, I'm funny. I have a sense of humor. I'm not going to like focus on all these things that you want me to focus on. I'm going to be my own person here. And I think that she has so much fun with that. I think she loves the shock on people's faces when she says the things that she says.
Absolutely. She loves to joke around. And she loves to I think she likes to not rock the boat and piss people off, but she likes to be like, hey, what? Like, I can say this. I can do what I want. I can say what I want. And my comedy's edgy. She blames it on her comedy all the time. Mm-hmm. But I think that's her thing for sure.
Yeah. You talk about being seen, and I think that that's something that ultimately all the characters really want. Especially at the end of this episode, you're left with a sense that that's really something that they're all getting at. I know it ends with, well, it ends in a very dramatic way, but before we get to that scene where it's, the revelation, the discovery, it is that moment of connectivity where they're all sharing the same moment and they've come to this conclusion that they can just be together in this way. And they are, I think, after all the conversations, all of the meditations, all of the quote unquote breakdowns, like they are all, I think, seen as an individual in a different way at the close.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think connectedness is a really big theme of our show. All these kids kind of trying to find connection. They find it within this group of people and they find it within this GSA. And it's a place that makes them feel so seen. And I also think that was a really big inspiration for the show in general, was trying to create a show that was for queer kids, that celebrated queer youth, that made queer kids feel really seen.
Absolutely. And that day, that pimple video actually did pull us together, like, as actors.
Oh my gosh.
It's so gross.
It's so gross. We watched the video for the first time, like, shooting that day. I had never seen a video like that in my life. And when we all watched it together, those were real reactions. We were like, oh my God, that is so disgusting.
It comes up a lot. Like, every time you see it, you're not expecting it, but, like, you feel like you're going through it right with them. I got secondhand social media anxiety, like watching the video with them all.
So the funny thing about this episode, and this lockdown in particular, is that it happens in a GSA Club, which, for those of you who are listening and are not aware what that stands for Gay Straight Alliance. Now, In my high school, we had a GSA and I went to like 2 meetings, but it was just kind of like where the gay people would go to like look at pictures of Zac Efron and like that. Like there was no alliance that was forming, you know, like it just happened to be like the gay club at the school that had 3 members. But what's funny about this episode is that this lockdown takes place in the GSA Club, kind of like at the Scholastic Fair. So it's kind of everyone's first experience.
The debut. And some people, like we said, Ms. Mormon's first and only experience around these people, and definitely never again after this situation. So I want to know, what are your relationships with GSA? Like, have you ever been a part of a GSA?
Yeah, so I was in my school's GSA, and my senior year was a bit complicated because at the beginning of my senior year, I was working on the show. So I couldn't really lead any clubs while I was doing that, but we called it the Rainbow Alliance, which is a slightly more inclusive term than just gay straight.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's interesting. It was pretty small, but then we had these affinity meetings sometimes with like all the gay kids would choose to come to. We did occasionally have kids coming in and being like, just so everybody knows I am single. And it was like they would show up at the club like looking for a date, which I always thought was so genius.
Matchmaking.
Yes, and I was like, that's just incredible. But yeah, it was interesting. A lot of kids were nervous to go because they felt like they might be outed, and a lot of kids were totally comfortable going and loved it and loved just having a space where like they could hang out with other gay people. And there were so many different perspectives on it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I always really enjoyed it. I really liked talking to other queer kids. And as an upperclassman, too, it was really nice to get to talk to like queer 7th graders, queer 8th graders, queer freshmen who were kind of still maybe figuring out their sexuality or knew who they were but weren't out yet and didn't feel comfortable talking about it or didn't have the words to talk about it. So I did think it was a really great place to kind of interact with younger students, and when I was a younger student, older students who could kind of start a dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately that's what GSA is for, to kind of help welcome in and cultivate the next generation of queer youth. But Nathanya, I'm not quite sure how you identify, but have you ever been a part of a school, let's say Rainbow Alliance?
When we did the scene and when I read the scripts, that was like my introduction to GSA. I went to a performing arts high school in New York.
A GSA.
Yeah.
So it is a GSA.
So the whole school.
Exactly.
The whole school is a
The whole school.
Must be nice.
Exactly. I went through all of high school in the closet. I'm really trying to retire that phrase, let's just be honest. But I did not step foot in the GSA. I did not go to there because, again, like I thought if you're there, you're out and everybody knows it. And there was no like, I know there's an alliance, so you could be there as an ally, but it's like, baby. Like, at least that was the vibe at my school.
Yeah.
The most I think I ever ended up doing was like wearing purple on Spirit Day or like things like that to like show solidarity. But like that was as far as I got. So to get a glimpse into what I thought a GSA could have been like, of course now every day working at them is a GSA, but like seeing what it could have been, I was like, wow, like this is incredible. And to know that that's so much more accessible to so many other folks, not even just like at school, but like in many other ways, again, online, like on social media, on TikTok. Like I feel like the new little hype houses that are happening, little mini GSAs, if you will. But just like seeing that it doesn't actually have to be this physical space that sometimes might not also be safe to be in. Like lockdowns aside, like just like to physically be in, there's so many other ways to connect is incredible as somebody who would have loved to have done that in high school.
That is so cool that you went to a school that just was so open about celebrating something like that. And it almost is like, do you kind of feel like the, I guess, need for a Rainbow Alliance of sorts is dwindling in any sense? Like it almost seems like it's just kind of a collective consciousness now within youth. Obviously, there are those who might share the same beliefs, the backwards beliefs of their parents here and there. But I kind of feel like as time goes on, especially in high school now, there's almost this sort of collective acceptance as is. Do you kind of feel like there's going to be a need for an alliance?
It's such an interesting conversation that I've been having with a bunch of people lately. I personally think that there will always be a need for queer spaces as long as heteronormativity exists. As long as cisgender, heterosexual is the norm, I think that queer spaces will always be important. I think that a place to talk about queer issues, and only queer issues will always be extremely important. But I don't know, I definitely do agree that like kids are getting a lot more accepting, and I think that our generation is extremely accepting, and most kids that I encounter who are my age, even if their parents are more on the conservative side, have absolutely no problem with the LGBTQ community. But yeah, I do think it's interesting. I think that as a queer person, I've always really loved and valued those spaces where I could just talk to my gay friends about being gay, and that was always really important to me, even though all my friends were very accepting. I hope that the need for that continues, because I don't know, I think it was really special to me to always have a place where I felt like everybody understood a little bit. And I think that straight kids can be allies, but they won't necessarily always understand what you're going through as a gay person. And I think that it's important to have a community that understands what it's like and what you're going through and everything. And it felt like a little family. Yeah.
Absolutely. I completely agree with everything you're saying. I think it does remind me, though, of even the car scene with Ariana and her dad's, and even Chester a little bit when he's darkly going through the lists of all of the organizations. People live very intersectional lives. There are so many different ways you can show up, so many different, communities you can align with. So where do I gravitate to? Where do I go to? And not just like, okay, what's going to look best on my college application, but like truly I'm trying to find, an affirming group for me at a very formative point in my life. And that can feel like the biggest decision. I know, obviously, Ariana jokes like, oh, they would have cut off my phone bill. But like maybe there was something really even, regardless of how, the character identifies, like something really affirming about feeling like closer to her parents by choosing this community. But I feel like it's more common than not for folks to kind of maybe feel a little bit of push and pull with their various, identities and what their kind of like home can be on any given day.
Yeah, it's like you got to find your place where you feel like you fit in, where you feel like you get the support, and where you feel like you can talk about your feelings. So I feel like for Ariana, even though she doesn't identify, she learns a lot being around that group of people, and she becomes way more open. Like her character development comes from that group, and they check her every time she says something she's not supposed to, and she grows. Like she grows, and those people become her family.
Yeah, Ariana has such an arc over the course of our season 1. She truly has such an arc and so much character development. And I think as an actress, that must be difficult to kind of like start in one place and then slowly go somewhere completely different. But I definitely think that Nathanya has done a great job of having all of the humor and fun of Ariana's character, but also all of the really poignant, important moments of like her realizing fundamental truths about her family and her life. And I think that that's really interesting.
Well, I want to know, Nathanya, what ultimately drew you to this role?
Oh, man. And when I first read Ariana's character breakdown, I was like, oh, my gosh, she's so layered. That's the first thing I thought. And I was like, oh, this is so not stereotypical. It's so, it was so exciting for me to dig deep in this character and to find her truth and to really, like, dissect her and open her up. And even though on the surface there's a lot of comedy, there's a lot of social skills that she needs to work on, and there's a lot of sarcasm there, underneath all of that there's actually like a sweet, vulnerable teddy bear. So that for me was like exciting to really go in and dissect her like that.
We are talking about episode 2 of the HBO Max series Generation, and we are going to get into a lot more after a quick break.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We're talking to Generation creator Zelda Barnz and Nathanya Alexander, who stars as Ariana. But I want to be like very real for a second here, because I'm seeing this more and more, in a lot of quote unquote teen shows. Now you almost can't escape that there is usually a scene that takes place in an active shooter lockdown. I think no one would argue with the fact that this generation has been significantly more impacted by the reality that is, gun violence. And I know we're talking about how the inclination for a lot of folks when you're in it and when there's nothing else to do is to mask and to kind of find the joy, find the way to pass the time. But I'm curious what you, as an actor, Nathanya, what you think was actually going on behind the scenes of your character, of some of the others, like, and Zelda, I'm sure that you have insight into this as well, but like the kind of mental gymnastics you have to go through to tell yourself it's going to be okay, knowing that this is something that young people have to deal with like almost every other day,
I think the fact that the generation is numb to it says it all. Like, for those characters in that moment, everyone is individually going through a lot internally. Yeah. And you kind of see that unmask as the lockdown progresses. At first it's all fun and games. Everyone's joking around. Like, Ariana's there in the corner making jokes. And but as the lockdown progresses, they start as individuals, but then they come together, even with the pimple video at the end. You get a sense of togetherness. Everyone is internally stressing out for sure, but then at the end, everyone comes together, and like that togetherness that they all have, it's the support that they needed the whole time to get through it.
Yeah, the thing about lockdowns too is like that I remember so clearly. There was this one lockdown that it wasn't a drill, but we weren't sure what was happening. It didn't last very long, but I remember our teacher had us all sit in the same little corner of the classroom, and we were all like crammed against each other. And a couple kids were really freaked out and really scared, and I will never forget this. This one kid just goes, "I don't think it's a good idea that we're all sitting in the same place. If a shooter walked in here, it would be like a massacre in this corner." And I was just like, why would you say something like that when kids are so scared? But it's just like people joke about it to deflect their feelings, I think, and people joke about it because there's so much stress in these situations, and I think it's easier to just make a joke than it is to acknowledge those feelings. And yeah, I don't know, I think that for a lot of our kids, they start off by doing that, and they start off by being like, oh, well, this happens all the time, it's probably nothing, we can joke around, we can make this horrible, boring, terrifying situation kind of fun. And then at the end, we start to see Riley unravel a little bit, we start to see Chester unravel a little bit, and we start to see that anxiety as time goes on kind of getting to them more and more. And just the not knowing is so scary, and I think it drives people to these points where they're like making fun of the situation, even if the situation just really isn't funny.
But I think one of the beautiful things that you, and I mentioned this earlier, is that you do get to, in that moment, you still get to see different coping mechanisms play out. And some of them, are soothing. Like I thought Greta's moment was beautiful.
Yes.
That as somebody who like also understands, like it's weird to be playing with the idea of, this is an excuse also for me to be close to someone that I have a crush on. This traumatic moment is something that A, teaches me, a new coping mechanism, but B, gives me an excuse to touch a girl that I have a crush on. Again, a lot going on, a lot to unpack.
Yeah, seriously.
Right, of course. Yeah, I definitely think that lockdowns are a lot more normalized for our generation than they are for generations before us. And I think that that's scary, and it shouldn't be normal. It's so horrible that it's normal. But yeah, it's just something that we kind of have to live with. And so I think that a lot of us do kind of use humor. A lot of us don't take it seriously. I remember I had one 6-hour lockdown that went into 6 p.m. Because there was police activity in our neighborhood and we weren't allowed outside. And I remember I think I was in a physics classroom, and we all went through the science materials drawer and started making goo and having fun. And it's just you have to kind of do things to distract yourself. And I think it's easier to just do things to distract yourself from kind of the stress and the fear, and the fact that you haven't eaten also for 6 hours is they don't bring you food when you're in a lockdown because they can't. So oftentimes you're just stuck there and you're so hungry for so long. And I think that it's just, you have to kind of have something fun or funny to focus on that isn't what's actually happening.
Yeah, I totally agree with Zelda. It's internally people are stressing, but it's so normal. And you get so numb to it that you just have to focus on something else. Whether it's the thing that's going on at home, or whether it's comedy, whether it's someone in the room that you might like. Whether it's focusing on someone else's stresses and calming them down, I feel like the distraction is what helps teenagers get through it.
One thing about Ariana is that she is also an absolute like ride or die friend. You see her friendship with Naomi and they are like thick as thieves. She is screening, the saucy photos. Like she is standing up for her. She is right next to her, spoiler alert, in a very, tumultuous scene. She's screening the boys. It's everything. She is right there. What did that mean to you to get to play, a character that is representing like a really strong and I would say like spunky, like female friendship?
I grew up with all boys. I have 4 younger brothers and I'm the oldest and the only girl. So for me to like play a character, that was all about sisterhood and like bonding with her girls, that was so, so exciting. And I feel like sisterhood is such an important thing for young girls. Yeah, that was just so exciting to play alongside Naomi and Delilah, who's played by Chloe East and Lukita Maxwell, and they're awesome. Those 2 characters are the ones who understand Ariana the most, and where she feels like she can be her true self. She's definitely a ride or die. She's definitely going to be there when you call her, and she'll definitely fight someone for her friends.
I love that friendship. I love that trio so much too, because they're all such different people. They're these 3 totally different, but in their own ways, very, very strong, very opinionated young teenage women. And I think that it's so interesting watching the 3 of them on screen, because they're all so different, these characters, but they all love each other so much. And it's really sweet watching that friendship kind of grow and arc.
Absolutely. I want Ariana in my corner.
I am so excited that we got the chance to talk to you, and I am even more excited to continue watching the show and watching the character unfold. You are so talented, so adorable, so sweet. And I just want to thank you so much for being here, and you too, Zelda, again.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, always, always, always a pleasure.
And we will be here every week breaking down each episode with the show's creators and writers and stars. It is going to be so much fun. Stay tuned.
Yes, can't wait.
Generation the Podcast is a production of HBO Max and iHeartRadio, hosted by us, Gigi Goode and Whembley Sewell.
The podcast is produced and written by Phoebe Unter, written and researched by Sierra Kaiser, and engineered, edited, and mixed by Matt Stillo. It's executive produced by Ethan Fixell.
If you haven't already subscribed, rated, or reviewed Generation the Podcast, please do so on the iHeartRadio app, HBO Max, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And of course, be sure to watch the series itself on HBO Max. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.